Hey everybody, what's going on? Glad that you made it. My name's Jeff. I'm one of the pastors here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you came in, you're not sure what you kind of walked into, what this is all about. As we say every week, we just want to make sure we try to put everybody at ease with the reality, the truth that none of us in this room or anywhere else connected to our church has all the answers, has it all kind of figured out. So, however you came in, you're welcome. One of the things we talk about too is we say we want the only barrier between a person and Jesus to be Jesus, meaning Jesus might say some things that are kind of challenging or, we might not like them, but let's let that be the barrier and nothing else. And so, again, whatever you're bringing with you, whatever you came in with, let's just kind of like put that aside for a minute and just go, yeah, you're welcome. Because here's the deal. We're doing our best that we can to aim our lives at Jesus. And that's really tough sometimes. And we need each other to kind of help each other along the way because we make our own mistakes. Things happen to us. Life gets in the way and we need each other. So however you came in today, you're not only you welcome. Our goal and our secret ambition, our sort of secret agenda is to get you more connected, so you don't have to do life by yourself. So that's what we're all about. A ton to cover. Glad that you made it. Let's jump right into this. Now, this past week, obviously, big news. I've been thinking a lot about space. There's been a lot of conversation about space in the news. This is actually a photo from the Artemis 2 spacecraft as they're watching the, another kind of Earth rise and all kinds of stuff. It's amazing stuff. But there's lots of different ways we can think about space. I mean, obviously there's outer space, but there's also this. This is space, just a big field of wheat. Space. The open ocean is space. An enormous warehouse is space. A blank canvas is space. This particular room without any furniture in it is a space, right? This is all the things we could do in here. There's all the things we imagine that can be done. This is an area for which we can do certain things. This also is space too. It's a couple of people in a diner with a bunch of empty tables. A parking lot, of course, which is this obviously, our church, every service, if you've ever been with us before, we always have tons of parking. That's always our joy. But there's not enough cones in this spot, obviously. But there's obviously, you think about space. This is so great. When you need a parking space, this is the best news. But this is also space. Trying to figure out what to put on an empty page can be either beautiful or it can be a challenge. This also is space too, and it sends a different message. All of these empty shelves where there could have been food, those all send a different kind of message. Space is about what could be. It's about what could be or what can be done. Defining space has very little to do with boundary markers. It has mostly to do with what can be done inside of those things. If you have a room in your house that you want to create space for people to exercise or do whatever, you're looking to see if the boundaries are far enough away for you to do the thing. But most of the time, we're talking about boundaries. We're talking less about the boundary markers and more about what can be done in them. This is kind of the best version of space is about freedom. It's about this a bit of freedom or liberty. Like we talk about workspace, or we talk about a space to gather, or a space to stretch out, or a space to run, or emotional space. All of those things are about having a kind of familiarity. But when there's a kind of or kind of freedom, when things are sort of less familiar, when there's a kind of unwanted version of space, it just kind of quickly descends into chaos or exile. I don't know. Just show of hands in the room. And this is too painful. Don't raise your hand. But anybody in here, you ever try to run away as a kid? Like you just thought, I'm running away. Like I'm gonna do this. Anybody try it? Yeah. Okay. Some of us did it. I remember I remember when I was like, Mom, I'm leaving. I've had enough of being 7 years old and I'm ready to leave. And anybody else who tried to run away, anybody else have their mother help them pack? That was literally what happened to my house. My mom was like, okay, what else do you think you're going to need? And I'm like, probably this and probably a t-shirt, probably that toy. I mean, I need those Hot Wheels to go with me because you never know. It's like, I'm packing all of this stuff up. And my mom is realizing something. She's like, he's not going to get past the front door. He's going to put all this stuff in a suitcase and he's not going to get past the front door. And I had my reasons about the world I was living in. It was so cruel and unusual. And I had no preparation. I was not prepared for the space that was beyond that door. And my mom knew it. And of course I knew it. And I never did make it outside that door. Now, after we depart, wherever it is we're departing from, and before we arrive, that is, not cleverly called a space between, right? There's a kind of there's a kind of space between all of these sorts of things where we kind of find ourselves. Anthropologists, we talked about it last week, called liminal spaces or liminality. And these are spaces that are between what was and what's next, or neither here nor there. And they're kind of a nowhere place to be. And for a lot of us, as we kind of have lived in these spaces, maybe we're there right now in sort of big ways or in small ways, but This is the home most often of the worst decisions and our biggest regrets in our lives. Those places where we can't figure out where we are. And what happens when we don't know where we are is also that we don't know who we are. And so all of the struggling to figure out all kinds of stuff leads us to make all kinds of stupid decisions and things we regret. Common practice, which is sort of tied to this idea of worst decisions and big regrets, is what we talked about last week, is anchor replacement, meaning there's attachment to things. Whatever was anchoring us before that we held on to, once that goes away, we tend to find ourselves not moving toward the best choices. We find ourselves in rebound relationships and old addictions and bad habits and all that other stuff. And we're not searching for the best solution as we kind of lose an anchor. What we actually end up searching for is the first available or the most accessible solution. And we attach ourselves to that. If you've ever been disoriented, it's the first thing you try to find when you're falling. And the Bible is a story about the space between. It's written to people who are in a space between. It's written for people who find themselves in a space between. The whole thing is essentially covering this idea of people who find themselves in a space between. Now, the space between, like we've talked about, it's all over the Bible, but just to give you a couple different examples, there's the space between is where people feel God's absence. Psalm 113 famously laments, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart," right? "How long will my enemy triumph over me?" Over and over again. It's like I'm feeling like I'm in between some things and you're not responding. The bargain is you do what you're supposed to do and save me from the situation, and you're not doing is what this is saying. But there's also this other point where in the midst of the middle, the between, the space between, that's where God shows up. That's where his rescue is also. Check this out in Psalm 78. "But he," meaning God, "brought his people out like a flock, and he led them like sheep through the wilderness. He guided them safely so they were unafraid." That's a way different sort of characterization of God from that moment before about where are you? Here, it's God's personally up close, not even having people be afraid. And both things can be true for people who have found themselves in the space between. Say it another way. The Bible is for people who know with great familiarity the disorientation of the space between. So to bring you up to speed, to catch you all up really quickly, and again, if you missed a lot of stuff, go back last week, check it out. But to give you just kind of catch you up to speed, we're talking about sort of the Israelites here. The Israelites are the descendants of a person whose name's Jacob. His nickname is Israel. So the Israelites are named after a guy named Israel. After 400 years of being in slavery in Egypt, God hears their cry. He sends Moses, and with a series of miraculous sort of occurrences, he sends Moses to rescue his people and lead them out of slavery. And after slavery, and before they reach this land of promise that God's intending to take them to, this promised land, they live in a between space called the desert, the wilderness desert, and the people panic and they want to go back to, they even actually say over and over again, "Take us back to Egypt. It was better in Egypt," over and over again. To say it another way, the Israelites had no idea what to do with the newfound freedom they'd been given. God rescues them. Moses is leading them out into the wilderness, and they have no idea how to act as free people. They've never done it. For more than, roughly 20 generations or so, these people have lived without freedom, and they're looking for something. They're looking for some kind of way to handle themselves, looking for an anchor in the chaos of the freedom that they weren't prepared for. And so they find an anchor. They start saying, "Let's go back. It's better in Egypt." They start saying, "Look, the God who's led us out here, we don't know who he is. Let's just build an idol of the God that we kind of can worship." And they make an idol, another God. And they're like, "This is the God we should worship." And in no uncertain terms, slavery is cruel. I mean, there's no other way around it. The slavery of that captivity and that slavery was cruel, but it was for them. Notice this. It was a way of actually bringing order to their lives. It was a way to order chaos. It's a cruel way to do it, but it is order. And when there's disorder, oftentimes what will happen is we will choose the most orderly thing, even if it's evil or bad, like slavery. To say it another way, what we kind of discover throughout the Bible, and it's true among us too, which we'll point out in a second, but it's true among us too, that captivity, whatever that looks like, will always have a certain measure of gravity. Captivity will always have gravity. And the reason for it, even if it's evil, captivity, which it is, captivity will always have gravity because of its familiarity. Just simply because we're used to it is actually enough reason, and though we think that it's not, it's actually enough reason for us to say, it's better to be here than to be out somewhere where I don't know what to do with everything. That's unstable. There's a chaotic kind of part of the world, and living out into this kind of freedom is really, really hard. And so oftentimes we just gravitate ourselves back towards captivity. Now, the primary characteristic of captivity or exile, as we've been talking about it, is isolation. And people It's what's amazing is how much as a society, particularly right now in this particular sort of time, how often we choose it. Now, many of you, I'll show you, give you an example, and this is actually a fun example, but many of you like are familiar with the progressive, ads where the guy's talking about Dr. Rick is talking about people becoming their parents, young homeowners becoming their parents. So I want you to watch. I'm going to show you one of the commercials. This is one of my favorite ones. They're all funny, but this one has in it. I want you to catch the subtext here because about half to 2/3 of these commercials are about how people are supposed to act in the world, and all of them are about that. But 2/3 of them are basically about the way that you act is you don't talk to people, you don't interact with people. Check this out. Look, notice this.
To you, it may just be an elevator.
Here goes nothing.
But for a young homeowner becoming their parents, it's a learning opportunity.
Come on in. The more the merrier. Paris, huh? Bonjour. We got any out-of-towners in the elevator?
Tom, it is not easy.
10th floor, huh? Must be a heck of a view.
Okay, see how everyone else is facing this way?
Progressive can't save you from becoming your parents, but we can save you money when you bundle home and auto with us.
Okay, that was terrible. Okay, let's hang back. We're going to try that again.
Okay, now, obviously, it's funny, and you're not supposed to stare at people in the elevator. It's really bizarre. But the point is, almost all of the things, if you watch these commercials, almost all of them, and you can watch poor Dr. Rick, like, oh gosh, you're just killing me, like talking to people and all that stuff. Over and over again, the point seems to be that the way you live now is you don't really interact with other people. That's the best way to live. Stop interacting with people. That's bizarre. That's weird. That's the subtext. And we all know it. That's why it's funny. That's why this thing actually works out. We live in a society that actually says it's better not to interact with people that are around you in your world. One guy, a really long article called The Antisocial Century. This guy, Derek Thompson, writes, and it's really worth reading. But here's what he says, just to sum up part of it. He just goes this. In a healthy world, people who spend lots of time alone would feel that ancient biological cue. I'm alone and sad. I should make some plans. But we live in a sideways world where easy home entertainment, oversharing online, and stunted social skills spark a strangely popular response. I'm alone, anxious, and exhausted. Thank God my plans were canceled. Now, I have to tell you, that's funny to me also, but it's also funny because it's so true in my life. I live my life more often than, and I thought it was just because I'm an introvert, because I am, but I think that's expanded a bit and the world has let me become more of an introvert, but I honestly live my life in this way by some kind of mantra that looks like this. There's nothing better than no one. Think about that. Nothing better than no one. I would rather, oh my gosh, I just get to sit right here by myself and then wonder why I'm feeling so isolated and alone and depressed and sad. But man, it's better than actually going. I mean, honestly, this is actually how I live the way I think sometimes. The truth is, so many of us actually, there's a gravity towards this way of being. It's already part of our culture where we live in such a way that says, it's just better to be by myself over and over and over again. And God seems to be continually fighting against our effort to just gravitationally move towards isolation. So, the way God does it, at least as the way we're talking about it for now, the way God does that battle, fight against our effort to isolation, is that he makes a space within a space. Now, we have a word for that, right? A space within a space is called a place. This is where, as opposed to freedom, the preeminent value here is about security. It's about identity. It's about where one is about liberty. This space is about liberty. Place is about security. It's actually a place that does have defined boundary markers. It's like there's an in and an outside part of things. This is all this is. There's a uniqueness to a particular place. It's separate from, it's different from, it's not common to the other places. And the way to think about that is like this. God himself, in his uniqueness, defines a place that he wants to be among his people who are in the wilderness. That place is a worship tent called the tabernacle. So he's like, I'm going to dwell among these people. And it's different from all the other tents of all the other people. All the other people are living in tents. They're all common, and his is unique among them. And the making of a particular place always requires this kind of discipline. Yes to this and a no to that. We say yes to this, but no to that. Not everything gets a yes when it's like in God's place here, right? This unique area that God's kind of cordoned off for himself. Not everything gets a yes. And maybe that feels cruel. Like, why can't he have my thing? I think whatever I'm passionate about, why can't that be a part of it? Why can't the things that I love the most or whoever I think that I am, why can't that be part of it? That's fair. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is cruel. That's true. But the whole expression of yes to this and not to that is cruelty until you start to begin to understand what it looks like. This is how art is made. An artist is making a choice to a color or a shape or a design or a line. It's how cakes are baked. Yes to this, but not to that. Yes to strawberries, but no to chocolate, or vice versa. I don't know. A lot of people make that mistake, but most of the time it's chocolate, fruit. We don't need it in a cake. But a lot of you, maybe you think that, but that's, you have issues. That's fine. We all have issues. But like how cars put together, what an engineer does when they're building a car, how plans are made. We can't say yes to everybody's plan. We have to figure out what we're going to be doing. A yes to this and a no to that is how a place is made. Now, when God is articulating the picture of this place, he's in the rearview mirror is always the creation story, which we're going to come back to throughout this series, at the beginning of the Bible. And in the beginning of the Bible, what you have is that God, the Bible tells us that the way that what you have is primarily, at least in the first chapter, is primarily this ordering of things. There's all of this chaos, which is called, it's literally is making something out of nothing. It's the wild, the waste and wild, the shapeless and void, or formless and void is how it's described. God brings all of the shapelessness to order. And the next step he does in ordering all things is separate things. It's separation. It's boundary making. He separates the light from the dark, and he separates the waters above from the waters below, and the land and the sea. And you get the idea. So much of the whole idea of what's being separated out is drawing out boundary lines to bring order. And the intention, as God sort of puts at the center of this creation, a garden, it's for God and people to dwell together. That's the purpose. And people, as a side note, undo God's creation by reintroducing chaos to make it about themselves. This is where it's sort of, they decide it's all about me, and they make their own decision, and the whole thing starts to come unglued. Now, with that in mind, remember, God is trying to get back to a place where he dwells among his people. We read this last week, Exodus 40:34. Then the cloud, this is God's presence, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, which means here comes God. If he's now dwelling among his people, and it's a blessing that God dwells among his people, but let's put an asterisk by that. The God of the universe has made his home, his intended home, among the people in this worship tent, this tabernacle thing. But that's a little bit crazy if you think about it. It's like hosting a thermonuclear reactor for dinner. Like, it's really powerful. It's really beautiful. I guess it can do all kinds of good things, but it can also melt your face. This is kind of what's happening. God has come to dwell among his people. He's made his determination. All of what makes him so radioactive is his holiness. And the question God has is, how can this radioactive God be among his people and somehow also protect them from himself, his radioactive, face-melting thermonuclear power that's right in their midst? How does he help them to do that? What's interesting is this is what God's concern is, and the Israelite God is making a way. He's intent on making a way for his people, for himself to be with his people, or his people to be with him. And the subtext always, when God is moving towards his people, is always, you can kind of read this throughout the scripture, it's also he's trying to figure out a way, or not trying to figure out, he's giving the people a way for people to be with other people. So it's not just how do I come to be with God, it's also related, how is it that I'm with other people in the best possible way? And the next part of the Bible, the next section of the Bible, the next chunk of the Bible is all dedicated to how is it that we live in proximity to this radioactive, super hyper holy God who is so much other than, but so insists on being near us. So what I'm going to show you next, for a lot of us, it's like, I would say, I'm going to go ahead and say all of us is going to be like, what in the world? How is this helping? And the answer is, I don't totally know. We're thousands of years from this moment of our own experience going, how is this the way that this is insulation or protection or some sort of process by which we can be in God's presence? I can tell you, though, as we read it, it's crucial to understanding the bigger picture of the Bible. So here we go. Let's step into it. Here we go. Leviticus chapter 1, verse 1 says this. This is the next part of the Bible. The Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, and he said, speak to the Israelites and say to them. So God's speaking to Moses still. Here's what he says. Oh, by the way, I should say this. If you've ever tried to read through the Bible, Leviticus is the part of the Bible, if you ever started and went at the beginning and got to this part, you were like, okay, I'm pretty much done. This is a brick wall. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to assume people are saying important things from it because it is really tough to read. So stay with me. Just buckle down. We're not going to read all of it. Obviously, just stay with me here as we get into it. Okay. So speak to the Israelites and say to them, when anyone among you brings an offering. So let's stop right here. The word anyone among you is an important phrase. That whole anyone among you thing means that it's not just a particular group of people who are already wonderful or one or two people who are doing a great thing. It's anybody, which is a really crucial point here. Anyone among you brings an offering to the Lord, bring as your offering an animal from either the herd or the flock. So when the Israelites leave out of Egypt, they got a bunch of animals with them too, presumably for this purpose. Now, he says, the Bible says, God says, make an offering of an animal. So it's some kind of burnt offering. We'll talk about this in a second. But you make an offering of an animal and then come to the tent. This is what you're going to do. Now, the offering, by the way, all these practices would have been totally commonplace in the ancient world. For us, they're solely bizarre. Stay with me, though. The word offering, as we talk about it, is a word that you and I might have, that's the best way it's translated, but this is what it is in Hebrew, korban. And that it literally is the noun form of this phrase, come near. So come near as a noun phrase, come near. So the idea, you can get already in the meaning of what's happening here. When God is telling his people, I'm making a way for you to be in my presence, he's saying, when you bring your come near, this is how it ought to look. The whole point of everything that he's doing is so the people can come near to him. The space between is always estrangement, not nearness. And here God's saying, here's how you do this. And he's saying, look, how is it that you come near? You bring a come near. Does that make sense? That there's no one has to be an imposter at all anymore. You bring the come near. Now, keep on reading. Verse 3. If the offering is a burnt offering, this is what he's talking about here, from the herd, which means it's going to be entirely burnt at the altar here. You're to offer a male without defect. You must present it at the entrance of the tent of meeting, so it'll be acceptable. So you walk your animal to the front of this tent of meeting, which has like a big fence around it. You walk out there, you present it, so it will be acceptable. Then you're to lay your hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on your behalf to make atonement for you. What's happening here is you're actually making the animal kind of representative of you, which I know is totally bizarre for us, but making an animal representative of you. Then what happens, which I'm not going to go into here, there's the blood of the animal, which is where all of the life of the animal is. This is in the ancient world where the life of the animal existed in the blood. All of that blood then gets like sort of sprinkled throughout or splattered throughout the altar as a way of doing a couple things. It says, for this reason, to make atonement for you. Now, we've talked about this before, but to kind of refresh it a little bit, in this particular case, we're going to take it to the next level. The word atonement, which does mean cover or cover over, here what's being described is kind of it's actually a debated kind of topic, but basically it covers two things. It covers a debt owed. So think about it, it's like, hey, I'm out of money. Can you cover me? You get the idea of atoning. Can you cover for me? We're going to McDonald's. Who's got some money? Can you cover me? Yeah, I got you. I got you covered. Debt covered, right? That's part of it. But the other part of it also, which is a moral debt, which is all kinds of stuff too that goes on there. But also it's a covering over any contamination. It's a kind of purification. And all of the offerings that the people make, they're not just for this purpose. They're not just for the kind of atoning sacrifice kind of stuff. Some of them, you make an offering for, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Whoops, I didn't know I did that is another kind of offering. You have some offerings that just involve grain and oil. They're not all with animals. But one offering that I want to focus on is called the fellowship offering or the peace offering. And it's mentioned twice in the first couple chapters of Leviticus, talking about this kind of idea of a peace offering, and it's an animal. And here's what it says. Notice this, okay? This is really cool. So it goes through all the description of how this animal is offered and what the priests are supposed to do with it and stuff. And then in the concluding couple sentences about it, here's what it says. Leviticus 7:15, the meat of their fellowship offering of thanksgiving, notice this is like a joy offering, must be eaten on the day it's offered. They must leave none of it until morning. So try to put that in perspective. You walk your animal in to be sacrificed, and then you sacrifice it, and then the expectation is that you would eat all of it. So it's like, it must leave none of it until morning. So if someone has to make an offering of thanksgiving, isn't God good? They walk their animal over there. They do the sacrifices. The next couple chapters or the next couple verses talk about which parts go to which people and all that stuff. But most of it is just left for the people, which means it's a barbecue. The whole thing, when people come to God and go, isn't God amazing? They bring this expensive animal, huge animal, and it has to be a neighborhood barbecue, which means people you don't even like have to help you finish off. Otherwise, you're disobeying. Hey, if there's anything left, you're disobeying. It's a community feast. Everybody show up. It's going to be amazing is the idea. This animal will sometimes be called the calf of the stall, and later it will be called the fattened calf. So the whole idea here is there's a celebration with God, and it brings the people near. You see how these two things overlap. Now, again, some of you are wondering, well, that's great. How does that work? What's that all mean? Let me tell you a familiar story. Some of you might know a famous story. Not all of you might be familiar, but it's a famous story in the Bible where Jesus tells this story, and even people who aren't Jesus-y people, the story's got so much like traction. You might have heard of it before. It's called the prodigal son story. As I kind of set this up, Think in your mind also that the garden picture of the beginning of the Bible about what God is doing in a garden to be with his people is in view as well. Okay, so check this out. This wasteful son, prodigal means wasteful. This wasteful son, he leaves the place of his own house with his father. He asks, and he runs out, this, which feels like, remember, there's a place with boundaries with inside of it that's contained, a lot like a garden, you might say. He runs out into the space out there, believing that his father is withholding from him a life he could have. So he asks for his own inheritance, which is the same thing as saying, I wish you were dead right now. Gets his inheritance from his father, and he runs away. And he's unprepared for the space that's beyond his own front door. And that freedom very quickly devolves into chaos, and he gets himself into a place where he is at a proverbial rock bottom place, and he says to himself, well, my father's servants live better than this where he was. I'm going to head back. So here's what happens. Pick up the story. Luke 15, verse 20. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion, and he ran to his son. Notice the coming near language that's happening here. And he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And then he said, bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. Which means what's happening here is the father's making an offering and hosting a community-wide event. It's a barbecue. It's a peace offering. It's this thankfulness offering that comes as part of that offering chunk we just read about. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. He has, in no uncertain terms, found his way back to his place. Fundamentally, it's about the son returning to the place of belonging. It's a barbecue because my son's home. Now, in an honor-shame culture of the first century, when Jesus is telling his audience this is the last thing they could have imagined. Because what a good father does to a son who has shamed him is isolate him, is push him away. This is a scandalous idea that the father says, my son has squandered my money, ruined my family name, and let's have an enormous party to celebrate him. That is surprising. And the thankfulness, it's more than likely, it wouldn't be that the father would offer a fattened calf. He would offer some kind of other grief thing. There would be something else that would not be this kind of idea. The son wanted to have space, and it descended into chaos. And now he's back in a place with his father, a place of belonging. Now, for 1,500 years or so, all of this is the way all of these offerings went. These offerings went like this. People were making offerings and coming near to God. That was how that went. Every day, lambs were being killed, bulls were being killed, fattened calves perhaps are ready to go. They're all there. And the question that you might be asking, which is a really good question, is, well, if that's what they're supposed to do, why aren't we still doing that? Which some of you are surprised. We're going to bring out the animals right now. Let's bring them out right now. Let's go ahead. No, I'm just some of you might be wanting an animal. We're not going to be doing any animal sacrifices anytime soon. It's not on the agenda. But why aren't we doing it now? And the reason is really simple. And it's a lot. I'm not trying to condense this into one verse, which is a bit ambitious, but just bear with me here as we do this. The reason for that comes from the person of Jesus. Ephesians chapter 2 says this, now in Christ Jesus, you who were once far away have been brought near. Notice the language, you have been brought near. That means at some point, someone did their come near offering on our behalf. Now in Christ Jesus, you who were once far away, way out there in the chaos, have been brought near by the blood of Christ. The Bible will spend a lot of time trying to help us understand that it is the final once and for all sacrifice of Jesus that did away with all of the everyday, ongoing, perpetual sacrifice system. So all that we're doing now is we're living in a world where Jesus has brought us near. Jesus is the final korban, the final come near for us. Now, there's a lot more we could talk about with that. Suffice it to say, you and I don't do animal sacrifices because there is only one sacrifice that covers everything that we're revolving our entire lives around as people who follow Jesus, is Jesus himself. So for those of you who ever wondered that, that's your answer. That's what that's all about. Some of you, maybe you already, and some of you aren't ready to revolve their lives around Jesus. I get that. That said, this is the reason why churches don't do that. So what do we do with that? For all of the space betweeners, all of us who live in the in-between spaces, which after last week, talking to so many people coming forward to receive prayer for the space that they're in and the chaos of the moment that they got thrust into. For all of us space betweeners, for all of us who have left a thing or are leaving, or there's a space out in front of us, for all of us who have been left, someone left you. For all of us who are running to something or running from something, all of us who step into an unknown that we are choosing, and some of us are stepping into an unknown we did not choose. For all of us who maybe sought a promise of freedom that we thought this is going to be the greatest thing, I'm going to have so much freedom, and it became a kind of chaos. And for all of us who have ever said, I'm just trying to get a little space, but it was really just code for isolating, let me ask you a question. Let me pose something to you and ask you a question. The Bible is trying to communicate with as much clarity as possible that God is inviting me to come near. God's inviting you to come near. Assume that this is what the Bible is trying to communicate. Some of you are like, I'm not sure he's inviting me to do that. He doesn't know what I've done. Remember when we talk about the offering, it's anyone. Jesus comes to those who were far to bring them near. The whole Bible keeps going. You're not far enough. You cannot be far enough away that God can't come near to you and you can't come near to him. God is inviting me to come near. Just let that sink in. Maybe that's something you've never actually wrestled with or heard of before. God's inviting me to come near. So the question that I want to ask you is, what's holding me back? What's holding me back? One of the kind of important moments or important things to kind of think about when it comes to that is, when I'm isolating, when I'm calling it breathing room, but it's really not what it is, right? I always can see the sort of impact that it's not really a kind of space that I'm getting, because the impact is on my relationships and they're damaged or they're hurt or they're compromised in some way. I think it's also fair to say, well, what's the payoff? There has to be some value in this idea of keeping some part of my life or my whole life at a distance from God, because there's aspects of my life that are farther from God than other parts, right? So what's the payoff? I'm getting something. I get some kind of experience of freedom, at least the way it feels right now. At some point it might become chaos, but that's why I'm doing it. God's inviting me to come near. So what's holding me back? Are you afraid of being rejected? Maybe you've been rejected before. Maybe that's part of your own story in your life. Are you asking some serious questions and you're still wondering about some things? Is there a pain or a hurt that has made so little sense to you and it's so disorienting to you that you're like, I don't know if I want to be near God who allowed that kind of thing to happen? It's fair. Maybe you're swimming in some doubts, and maybe you feel like an imposter. Like, maybe I'm not, I know it says anyone, but there's definitely quotes around that. But what's anyone? Well, if you're an imposter, if you feel like that, well, all of us are. It is that Jesus has made a way for those of us who are far away to be brought near. God's inviting me to come near, so what's holding me back? One last image. This is one of the most famous images from the Artemis 2, launch. It was one of those things that, or the mission. It was one of those pictures that people still hold. It's one of those ones from the original 1968, 69, Apollo missions. People are like, the moon or the Earthrise is one of the most beautiful things. And it does describe something kind of amazing. But there's another picture that came out of this whole story of the Artemis 2 crew. And there's that one, but there's also this one, which went viral. One of the things that's amazing about the Artemis mission was the space that they were able to explore. But what's more compelling, perhaps, for a lot of us, is that these astronauts found a place to belong. Let's pray together. Jesus, for all of us, just wondering if we've just been too far out, that we're beyond and cannot, or there's parts of our life that we actually have put out in the farther outer reaches because we're so afraid of coming near to you. Father, would you just give us a sense in this moment that we don't have to hold back? That your whole intention, the whole Bible, is about you moving toward us and us being enabled to move toward you, to come near to you. Maybe as you're just kind of in this moment too, folks, as you're sitting here, maybe there's a part of you that needs to come forward, to come near, to receive some prayer, to really tangibly experience through the power of someone else just enacting that presence of God in your midst, put their hand on you to say, come near. You have a place. You have a place. So maybe that's what you'll do in this response time. But Father, as we get a chance to respond, would you hear us as we continue to pray and to sing and to respond to the reality that you have made a place for us to belong in the middle of our space between. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.